Happy Face Your Fear Friday, everybody. I want to talk again today about messing up. I talk a lot about failure because failure is one of these things that is so misunderstood in our culture and so scary for us because of how much we misunderstand it. And because we misunderstand it, we also make other people pay when they fail. We make ourselves pay and we make others pay. And so when we fail, we have a fear of being made to pay for that, or being held accountable for that, or being taken to task for that. And the thing is, failing is a part of the process. Messing up is just a perception. Messing up is just one way of defining the things that happen in your life. I'm saying this because I've been on a massive growth cycle since the lockdowns began. I would say my spiritual awakening happened back in 2010 to 2012. I went through this whole period of realizing that a lot of society, a lot of our culture, a lot of our institutions were a setup, that they were false in terms of what they really accomplished in the world. I ran a medical marijuana dispensary for 7 years, and during that time I came up close and personal against legal hypocrisies between the feds and the states, between the states and the cities, and it made me understand that this notion of a free society where everyone is always working for the greater good was total bupkis, that there's a lot of greed and a lot of shadow and a lot of other stuff going on. That led me directly into a spiritual awakening, because as I started to doubt the culture around me and the society around me and the things that I was told in the indoctrination factories we call schools growing up, I began to become curious about other aspects of life too, and think, are there other places where I've been lied to? And it led me to all of my spiritual curiosities. It led me to learn about past life regressions, to learn about mysticism, to learn about hypnosis, all of that stuff. So I would say I went through a spiritual awakening 7 years ago, or 8 years ago. But then when the lockdown hit, I realized that I had actually been in this bargaining stage for the last 7 years. I see the awakening as having the same sort of cycle as the stages of grief. When you go through grief, you go through these 5 stages: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Sometimes you go through them in a slightly different order, but that's the basic cycle when you go through a grieving process. Awakening is very similar to a grieving process, because when you start to awaken to the true nature of society and the true nature of reality and the true nature of your own inner workings, and how you have a lot more control and agency over what happens to you than you once thought, than you were told, there starts to feel like a huge loss. It feels like a huge loss. And so, because you've lost everything you believed to be true, you've lost the comfort of the propaganda of the notion that things will just be taken care of. All of that goes away, and you start to realize reality is different than I thought it was. There's a lot more magic in it, but there's a lot less sort of human comfort on one side of the spectrum. So you go through a grieving process. You grieve the loss of your total other understanding of how life was, and you start to embrace this new understanding. So I went through all those 5 stages back in 2012 to a degree, but really what I realized when the lockdown happened is that I went through denial and anger in full back then, and I had little bouts of depression and acceptance, but really I had been in the bargaining stage for 7 years. And what I mean by this is that I had been letting spirituality become only an identity for me on an intellectual level. I had all of these beliefs, I had all of this understanding, I had all of this quote-unquote wisdom, but I became this person who would just ruin dinner parties talking about past life regressions, or the Gulf of Tonkin, or the Lusitania, or how magic is real and how we don't understand quantum physics. And that was because I wasn't inhabiting or embodying those beliefs. I had just intellectualized those beliefs, because it is very scary and isolating to go really far down the magic and mysticism road when your whole environment and surrounding is about, college, marriage, career, 2 + 2 = 4. Everything, you go from one thing to the next, and you have a prescription for your life. And so bargaining was my way of trying to say, I've adopted these spiritual principles, I'm awakened, but to not actually have to ground them down out of my brain and into my body and into my life and into my behavior. And so I say that because since the lockdowns began, I had a sort of massive shift on the first day of the lockdowns where I switched out of the bargaining phase into the depression phase. And because I had this 7 years of momentum in the bargaining phase, the depression only lasted for like 2 weeks for me. And then I immediately switched into acceptance and was like, I have got to take all of this stuff I believe and make it true in my life. And that's what I've been doing. So I've adopted sort of a vegetarian diet. I've gone off processed foods as much as I can. I've quit smoking marijuana. I exercise more than ever. I'm finally doing a daily meditation practice for the most part. Literally all kinds of changes. And I was meditating here and there before over the 7 years, but didn't adopt the things that I believe and know to be possible to help set humanity free, to help improve our lives. I was just intellectualizing them instead of making them part of my life and my behavior. And since I've started making them part of my behavior, that's 6-7 months ago, I've sort of done a lot of massive changes really quickly. And I don't know if you can relate to this, but I tend to be very hard on myself. I'm learning how to get better at that. But I tend to be a bit of an asshole to me at times, okay? And so I've messed up along the way. Like just in the last 10 days around the holidays, I went to see a friend and we smoked a little pot together when I was up there. And since then, I've kind of gone in this, like for the last 10 days, I've just gone in this like, I don't want to say a downward spiral because it's not depressing and I don't feel like sad or anything, but I've sort of reverted back to some of my old behaviors. Like the last 10 days, I didn't meditate very much. I smoked pot many of the days. I've been eating piles of refined sugar, which if you are on my Instagram, then you saw my story this morning about that, or maybe you caught my video last week about the weekend of 12 donuts, which was also just like 2 weeks ago. So I woke up a couple mornings ago and was like, Brian, you're messing up. You're messing up your spiritual journey and you're messing up your growth. But then I realized that that's not true at all. That's just my inner judgy tyrant using words as a habit that I've engendered in myself to make me feel a certain way that I'm used to feeling, which is like that I don't measure up or whatever. And the truth is, messing up is just a perception about what's going on. So I can reframe these last 10 days. These last 10 days have not been me messing up. These last 10 days have been me experiencing a cycle in my growth. So I've made all of these massive changes for 7 months. And then for the last 10 days, sort of the nostalgia hit me, the holidays hit me, a break in my routine got to me, and I kind of like, I don't want to use the word backslid, but I don't know another word right now to put it. So I sort of backslid into some old habits. Not terrible habits, but definitely not healthy, mindful habits. Certainly not woke habits, you know? And so I was beating myself up over that, saying that I'm messing up and being afraid of messing up, because now that I do YouTube videos and I also try to like be an example for my family and my friends, and like I talk about healthy eating and I talk about exercise, and so to be a person who is eating piles of sugar suddenly again and skipping my meditations for the last 2 weeks just made me feel this huge and heavy weight. But that's BS, because I had this realization that the actual self-work that I've been doing to become a more peaceful and serene person, to turn my inner judgy tyrant into my inner cheerleader, that work doesn't stop in these fallow periods where we say to ourselves that we're messing up. We're not messing up, okay? We're not. We're just going with the circumstance. We're going with the flow. Yes, there's something to be said for discipline, and there's something to be said for every day trying as hard as you can to do the next thing and the next thing and to get better and better, and that works. But if you're losing your joy over it, then it's time to reevaluate, to stop, and to say, what is the next best thing that's going to bring me joy? And 10 days ago, prior to me starting to mess up, I was feeling this sort of like pressure, this closed-in pressure about all of the changes I made, and like, can I keep these going? Can I keep these going? And so what happened was, juggling all these plates of things that I want to be true about my life, but aren't yet fully habits, I just got overwhelmed and I just dropped them. I was like, fuck it. And I dropped all the plates and I just let them fall. And that was fine for a few days. And I was actually being self-gentle. And then a few more days into it, I started getting on my own case, being like, you're messing up too much. But those are just words, and that's not true. I took this, in this cycle of my growth, I took the perfect amount of time, the exact amount of time I needed in order to show myself that I do prefer the other choices without being angry at myself for the choices I made in order to show that to myself. So that's the thing. Self-gentleness is key. Self-gentleness is key even when you're in a fallow cycle, even when you're in a cycle that you would define as, that you would perceive as a cycle of messing up. It's not. It's just another cycle of feedback. It's another cycle in which you are showing yourself contrast. Do I prefer this or do I prefer this? And the other thing is, it's okay. It's okay to actually juggle both. Like, I've basically done a vegetarian diet over the last 7 months, and in this 10-day period, I actually snuck meat twice. And I say I snuck it because, like, I felt so much pressure about being an example of healthy eating to my audience and to the people in my life that when I felt this, I had this random urge one day, and I drove alone by myself to a fast food restaurant and ate some meat. And like, there are so many problems with that in my mind. Like, I was like, you suck for getting fast food. You suck for getting meat. Now you suck because you're a liar, because you're hiding it. But all of that's just mind trash. The truth is, it is okay to struggle. It is okay to be imperfect. And it is okay to be a vegetarian who once in a while screws up and eats meat. Or is that even screwing up? Is it even screwing up? Or are we just doing our best? And if you do your best, and if you know you're doing your best, then you can give yourself a break. You can cut yourself some slack. We are not taught in our culture and in this society how to cut ourselves slack, how to be self-loving and self-gentle. In fact, we're taught that selfishness is this one blanket thing and it's bad. And we are not taught the nuances within selfishness, that sometimes selfishness is good and necessary because selfishness means taking care of the self. So in order to do that, sometimes you might need to mess up. And sometimes when you do, you might need to be okay with the fact that you messed up. And that's all right. So I put this video on Face Your Fear Friday because I had some fear around the idea of even telling everyone that I screwed up these past 10 days. And then I realized I didn't screw up. I just had 10 days of different experiences, and they taught me a hell of a lot. So when you can look at your experiences and say, what am I learning? What is this teaching me? How is this helping me get to know myself? Then it doesn't make any sense to flog yourself. It just makes sense to stay present, stay aware, learn, and grow. Okay, so what have you been holding back? Or what have you been sneaking? Or what is it that you are afraid to share with the world? Let me know in the comments below. I love you and I trust you, humanity, and I will see you in the next video.